The house was quiet, too quiet. Elaine Porter sat in the dim light of her study, her hand resting on a stack of papers she had never thought she would gather. Receipts, contracts, proof of every dollar that had left her account in the name of love. The pen lay still beside her. The glass of water on the table had gone untouched for hours. Outside, the evening shadows stretched across the lawn, longer than she remembered, heavier somehow. She had always been in control, in the boardroom, in her company, in her life. But here in this stillness she felt something she had never allowed herself to feel before. A weight pressing against her chest, not from loss of money, but from the betrayal that money could not erase. There were no arguments echoing in the room, no raised voices, no slamming doors, just silence. The kind of silence that follows after someone you trusted has taken something more than your savings. It was the kind of silence that makes you ask yourself, when did it all begin to go wrong? And so, as the clock ticked softly in the background, Elaine leaned back in her chair and let her mind drift. Not forward, not to the lawsuit she had filed, but backward. To the very beginning. To the moment she thought love, even across 25 years, could be enough. Elaine Porter had never imagined herself falling for someone so much younger. At 58, she had long accepted that her life would be defined by board meetings, quarterly reports, and the comfort of routines she had built as a CEO. Ryan Cole entered her world almost by accident. A chance meeting at a charity event, his laughter a shade too carefree for the gray-suited crowd around him. He was 33, with the kind of restless charm that seemed to fill the room without effort. Elaine noticed how others leaned toward him when he spoke, how he turned ordinary moments into stories worth remembering. She had seen countless men posture in business, but Ryan, he was different. He made her feel seen, as though age was nothing more than a number printed on paper. Friends whispered, some smirked, a few cautioned her gently, reminding her of the gap that couldn't be ignored. 25 years. It was enough to raise eyebrows, enough to feed gossip. But Elaine had weathered judgment before. She wasn't afraid of whispers. She was afraid of living a life where she never reached for something that made her heart race again. And Ryan, he made her heart race. She funded dinners not because he asked, but because she wanted to. She bought him clothes, gifts, little things that reminded him he was cared for. When the bills came, she never flinched. She was, after all, the provider in more ways than one. And Ryan, with that boyish smile, always knew how to remind her why it was worth it. Still, beneath the sweetness, there was a note she could not ignore. He often spoke of escape, of wanting to see the world, of taking a trip that would make memories for a lifetime. His words weren't demands, not at first, more like dreams spoken aloud. But dreams, Elaine would learn, can carry a weight heavier than any bill. Because for Ryan Cole, that vacation was not just a wish. It was a promise he would not let her forget. For months, Ryan Cole spoke of it like a refrain, woven into conversations no matter where they began. Over coffee, he would mention beaches. On quiet drives, he would talk about sunsets over foreign waters. When laughter filled the room, he would slip in a line about how memories like these needed a backdrop far from the ordinary. Elaine Porter listened, always half amused, half weary. She had built her life on discipline, on denying herself frivolous escapes so her company could flourish. Vacations were luxuries she rarely permitted, even for herself. Yet here was Ryan, painting pictures of palm trees and candlelit dinners by the ocean, as though happiness lived only on some distant shore. At first, she told herself it was just talk, a young man's dreaming. But dreams have power when repeated. They become expectations, they become pressure. And slowly Ryan's wistful remarks turned into hopeful nudges, then into quiet persistence. It's not about the money, Elaine, he told her one evening, his hand resting lightly on hers. It's about us. A chance to prove this isn't just another headline for people to gossip about. A chance to show the world and ourselves that this is real. The words sank into her like stones in water. She was no stranger to skepticism from those around her. People doubted their love, doubted her judgment, doubted whether Ryan's affection was genuine or convenient. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that, if she gave him the vacation he always spoke of, their love would stand unshaken. So Elaine began to plan, quietly, methodically, as she did with any major decision in her life. Flights were researched, resorts compared, itineraries considered. Each expense tallied in her mind, though never out loud. She knew she would bear the cost, as she always did. But this time, it was more than just money. It was her way of proving, to herself as much as to Ryan, that love could be nurtured into something lasting. Ryan's eyes lit up when she finally told him. For a moment, she thought she saw a boy whose dream had finally been given life. He embraced her, thanked her, promised it would be unforgettable. Elaine smiled too, though deep inside, a quiet voice whispered, "Unforgettable can mean many things." Elaine Porter moved through the weeks of preparation with the steady rhythm of someone who had always carried responsibility. For her, organizing came naturally. Contracts, schedules, budgets had long been her language. But this time, instead of quarterly reports and staff meetings, she found herself reviewing flight confirmations, mapping out travel routes, and double-checking the resort details Ryan Cole had admired online. She spared no expense. It wasn't extravagance for extravagance's sake. It was hope. Every hotel deposit, every planned excursion, every dinner reservation felt like an investment, not into luxury, but into the fragile foundation of their relationship. She told herself that money could create space for love to breathe, that by removing worries, joy would naturally follow. Ryan's excitement was almost childlike. He spoke of snorkeling as if it were destiny, of long walks along the shore as if they had already happened. He counted down the days, texting her little reminders like, "Can't believe we're really doing this," or "This is going to be the trip of our lives." His energy was contagious, and for a while, Elaine allowed herself to believe that maybe this truly was the missing piece. But beneath the anticipation, a quiet unease lingered. She noticed how Ryan rarely spoke of the trip as theirs. His words often painted him at the center. His joy, his memories, his stories to tell. When she asked about small details like whether he wanted a quiet dinner or a lively outing, he would shrug and say, "Whatever you think," only to later steer the plans back toward his own desires. Elaine brushed the doubts aside. After all, what harm was there in giving? She had more than enough to provide, and if a vacation could buy happiness, perhaps it was worth the price. On the evening before their departure, she stood by her suitcase, carefully folded clothes stacked neatly inside. She glanced across the room at Ryan's bag. Half-zipped, clothes tossed in haphazardly, the mark of someone who had never carried the burden of planning. He caught her looking and grinned. "You always think of everything," he said. "That's what I love about you." Elaine smiled faintly, but the words echoed strangely. Love, after all, should be more than gratitude for what one provides. Still, as the night settled and the world grew quiet, she silenced the doubts again. Tomorrow they would leave, and tomorrow, she told herself, everything would change. The plane touched down beneath a golden sky, and for a moment, Elaine Porter let herself believe she had done the right thing. The air was warmer here, scented with salt and hibiscus. Palm trees swayed lazily in the breeze, and the sound of waves carried even to the shuttle that drove them to the resort. Ryan Cole pressed his face to the window like a boy seeing the ocean for the first time. "Can you believe it?" he whispered, half to himself, half to her. "We're really here." Elaine smiled, her hand resting on his arm. For all her doubts, there was comfort in seeing him so alive, so animated. It was worth it, she told herself. Worth the countless hours at her desk, the late nights she spent building the company, the quiet sacrifices she made so that she could afford this moment. The resort welcomed them with cool drinks and flower leaves. Their room overlooked the ocean, the horizon stretching wide and endless. Ryan insisted on opening the balcony doors, letting the sea breeze rush in. He stood there for a long time, arms spread, as though the world had finally bent to his will. Those first days were filled with what seemed like magic. Morning walks along the shore, the sand cool beneath their feet. Afternoons spent drifting between the pool and the beach, Ryan laughing easily, Elaine watching him with a mix of affection and awe. Evenings brought dinners lit by candlelight, where he spoke of adventures yet to come, of all the places they might go next time. Elaine held on to those moments. She let herself forget the balance sheets, the whispers of friends, even her own quiet fears. For once, she was not the CEO, not the provider, not the woman carrying the weight of everything. She was simply a woman in love, on vacation with the man who had convinced her to believe again. But love, like the tide, has a way of shifting. Even in paradise, shadows can creep in. And though Elaine did not see it yet, those shadows were already forming at the edges of Ryan's smile. At first, it was nothing more than a pause, a hesitation in his laughter. A moment when his eyes drifted somewhere else while she was still speaking. Elaine Porter noticed it on their third evening in paradise. The sunset was spectacular. the kind of orange and violet glow that travelers chase their whole lives. She lifted her glass, wanting to toast to the moment, but Ryan Cole's phone buzzed against the table. He glanced at the screen, smiled faintly, and excused himself with a quick, "Just a second." The second stretched longer than it should have. When he returned, his face carried a light she had not placed there. A brightness untouched by her words, her presence, her love. Elaine brushed it away, reminding herself that work or friends might still pull at him. Yet something in her chest tightened. In the days that followed, small cracks widened. Ryan grew distracted. At breakfast, his gaze often wandered to the horizon instead of resting on her. During walks along the beach, he lagged behind, texting more than talking. When she reached for his hand, sometimes he met her halfway, other times his fingers slipped away too quickly. Elaine told herself not to overthink. After all, love, especially love across 25 years, demanded patience. She was seasoned, grounded, capable of giving space. But the unease grew. The vacation he had dreamed about, the one she had funded with every hope and sacrifice, no longer felt like theirs. It felt like his. One night, she suggested they stay in, order room service, and simply talk, the kind of quiet evening she valued most. Ryan smiled politely, then urged her toward the nightlife, insisting they needed excitement, music, people. She went along, but the music felt too loud, the lights too bright, the laughter around them hollow. In the blur of it all, she saw Ryan slip away again, just for a moment. But a moment can be enough to plant suspicion in the soil of trust. Elaine lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling fan as it circled slowly above. The ocean whispered through the balcony doors, steady and calm, but her mind would not follow. The vacation was only halfway through, yet already she felt something slipping from her grasp. Something she could not buy back, no matter how much she paid. The morning began as so many had before. The sea was calm, the sky a soft blue, and Elaine Porter tried to steady herself with the rhythm of waves against the shore. Ryan Cole was restless, though. He drifted through breakfast with half-hearted conversation, his phone never far from his hand. By midday, he suggested going for a walk on his own. "Just to clear my head," he said with a quick smile, pressing a kiss to her cheek. Elaine nodded, though the unease within her deepened. He had never asked for space before. Not like this. Hours passed. The sun arched higher, then began its slow descent. Elaine returned to their room, expecting to find him stretched across the bed, perhaps napping, perhaps scrolling through his phone as always. But the room was empty. His bag sat in the corner, tossed open as usual, but Ryan himself was gone. She called him. No answer. She texted. The message showed delivered but unread. She tried again and again, each attempt swallowed by silence. Panic grew inside her, cold and tight. Elaine walked the resort grounds, searching the pool, the lounge, even the beach. She asked at the front desk if he had checked out an excursion, but there was no record. With every unanswered call, her mind traveled to darker places, accidents, strangers, hospitals. By evening, worry had hollowed her. She sat at the edge of their balcony, staring at the path below, watching shadows stretch long across the sand. Couples strolled by, their laughter rising into the night air. Each passing moment pressed against her like a weight she could not shake. Where was he? She tried to reason with herself. Maybe he needed space. Maybe he wanted to wander. But deep down, a sharper thought cut through. Maybe he wasn't lost at all. Maybe he was exactly where he wanted to be. The clock ticked on. Midnight approached. Elaine Porter, a woman who had managed empires and weathered storms, found herself small against the silence of a missing lover. She had given everything to this trip, to this man. And now, in the quiet of his absence, she felt the edges of betrayal closing in. Elaine Porter did not sleep that night. She sat upright in the chair by the balcony doors, the sound of the ocean rolling endlessly, mocking her restless thoughts. Each hour that passed without Ryan Cole's return etched another line of doubt across her heart. By dawn, she could no longer wait. She rose, dressed, and walked the grounds of the resort with a determination that felt both fragile and fierce. The path she had strolled with him days before now felt unfamiliar, foreign, as if the paradise she had paid for had shifted into something unrecognizable overnight. It was near the far edge of the gardens that she saw him. At first, her heart leapt with relief. There he was, alive, whole, safe. But as she stepped closer, her breath caught. Ryan was not alone. Another woman stood with him, younger still, her laughter carrying lightly in the morning air. Elaine froze as she watched Ryan lean down, his hand brushing the woman's cheek with a tenderness Elaine had thought belonged to her alone. And then, with the sun rising behind them, he kissed her. The world tilted. It wasn't anger that struck first. It was silence. A silence that began inside Elaine and spread outward, muffling the birdsong, drowning the waves. The kind of silence that comes when truth cuts deeper than any shout ever could. She could have screamed. She could have confronted him there, demanded answers, demanded the years and the sacrifices back. But she didn't. Instead, she stood still, long enough for the scene to carve itself into her memory like stone. Long enough to understand that the vacation Ryan had always wanted had never truly included her. When she finally turned away, her face was calm, though her heart burned. She walked slowly, deliberately back toward the resort. Each step was steady, as if she were walking not from betrayal, but toward a decision. Elaine Porter had given him love. She had given him trust. She had funded everything he ever claimed to need. But now, watching the sunrise from the wrong side of truth, she knew what must come next. It would not be another gift. It would not be another sacrifice. It would be the reckoning. Elaine Porter returned to their room in silence. She did not slam the door. She did not crumble into tears. Instead, she moved with the steady grace of someone who had carried too many burdens in her life to let one more break her in public. The suitcase lay open at the foot of the bed, half unpacked, half prepared, like a symbol of the limbo she had been living in. Slowly, deliberately, she folded her clothes back into neat stacks. The movements calmed her hands, even as her heart beat unevenly. Ryan Cole had not returned, and she no longer cared to wait. She packed what she had come with, leaving nothing of hers behind. The receipts she had saved, evidence of dinners, flights, the resort itself, she tucked carefully into a folder. Not out of sentiment, but out of foresight. Before she zipped the suitcase closed, Elaine paused at the balcony doors one last time. The ocean still stretched wide and endless, the horizon bathed in morning light. Once, she had thought of this view as paradise. Now it looked like emptiness, a stage set for a play she had never been meant to star in. When she finally wheeled her bag outside, she walked slowly through the resort, her head held high. Guests passed her with smiles, unaware of the storm that had unfolded behind her calm expression. She gave no sign of the betrayal she carried, no hint of the heartbreak that had turned her vacation into exile. At the rental car lot, she opened the trunk, lifted her bag inside, and slid behind the wheel. The keys were cool in her hand, the engine purring to life as though nothing had changed. But everything had. Elaine did not look back as she drove away. She left Ryan Cole behind with his hollow promises, left the resort behind with its empty beauty, left the dream behind that had cost her more than she could count. She did not leave with anger. She left with resolve. Because sometimes walking away is not the end of the story. Sometimes it is the beginning of justice. Back home, the silence of Elaine Porter's house felt different than the silence of that resort room. This was not the silence of waiting, nor of betrayal. This was the silence of reckoning. She placed her suitcase in the corner, but instead of resting, she walked straight to her study. On the desk lay folders already heavy with receipts. Dinners at restaurants Ryan Cole had chosen, clothing she had bought him for trips, the monthly bills she had quietly covered without complaint. Now she added to them the thick stack from their vacation. Airfare, resort fees, excursions he had insisted on, meals he had enjoyed with a smile. Piece by piece, the truth emerged in black and white. What had once felt like generosity now looked like evidence. She saw the pattern clearly. His dreams, her sacrifices, his wants, her payments. Love had been the mask. Money had been the foundation. Elaine sat back in her chair, staring at the folder. For years, she had been the provider, the one who made life possible for both of them. She had believed that her giving was an act of love, a way to balance the 25 years that stretched between them. But now she understood. Giving without balance was not love. It was a transaction disguised as devotion, and Ryan had taken full advantage. The betrayal was not just in the kiss she had witnessed. It was in every moment he had allowed her to believe she was enough, while quietly pulling more from her than he ever intended to repay. Her hand rested on the folder, steady now. She had weathered boardrooms filled with doubters, survived negotiations with men who underestimated her, fought battles others would have walked away from. This would be no different. Elaine Porter was not simply a woman scorned. She was a CEO. She was a fighter. And if Ryan Cole thought he could walk away with her money and her dignity, he was about to learn what it meant to underestimate her. The time for heartbreak had passed. The time for justice had begun. The decision did not come overnight. Elaine Porter spent days in thought, letting her emotions cool until what remained was clarity. Love had once softened her choices, but now it sharpened them. She was not driven by vengeance. She was driven by principle. She scheduled an appointment with her attorney, sliding the heavy folder of receipts across the polished desk. Each page told a story. The dinners Ryan Cole had enjoyed, the trips he had whispered into existence, the vacation that had been his dream from the start. "He asked for this life," she said softly, "and I paid for it. Every dollar, every mile, and when it mattered, he gave it to someone else." Her attorney listened without judgment, nodding slowly. The case, he explained, would not be easy. The law rarely untangled love from money. But Elaine was prepared. She did not flinch when he warned of public attention, of headlines that would twist her story into scandal. She had been judged before. She had survived whispers and doubt. She could survive this too. The papers were filed. The lawsuit began. News spread quickly, carried by the kind of curiosity that fed on age gaps and betrayal. Commentators speculated, strangers debated in cafes and online forums. Some mocked her for seeking repayment. Others defended her courage. But Elaine did not waver. She had learned long ago that leadership meant enduring the noise while holding firm to the truth. Ryan's response was predictable. He dismissed her claims at first, painting himself as a victim of circumstance, as though the receipts were fabrications and her generosity had been charity. But Elaine knew the difference. Charity is given freely. What she had given was trust, and he had broken it. As court dates approached, Elaine prepared not just as a woman wronged, but as a CEO who had faced harder rooms than this. She carried herself with the same calm resolve that had built her company, the same dignity that had carried her through betrayal. For Ryan, this was a scandal. For Elaine, it was justice. And justice, she knew, was worth every step. And so in that quiet courtroom, surrounded by strangers and judgment, Elaine Porter finally found what she had been searching for all along. Not the return of money, not even an apology, but the certainty that her voice still carried weight. That even after betrayal, dignity could be reclaimed. Her story is not only about loss, it is about strength. It is about what happens when love asks too much of one heart, and what it means to finally draw the line. If this story touched your heart, we'd love to hear from you. Share in the comments. What moment in Elaine Porter's journey moved you the most? And if you were listening closely, you might notice how often Elaine Porter's name came up. Drop your answer in the comments. We may feature your name in a shout-out as a thank you for being part of our Fiction Echoes family. If you enjoy meaningful stories like this one, the next chapter is already waiting. Just click the video that's about to appear, and we'll see you there. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and tap the bell so you never miss a moment of what happens next.